We meet a girl who narrates a story about a maiden named Konoha with a happy ending, like all the others, and her wonderful prince husband. We then see that she's a true fan of these stories, creating several similar ones throughout her childhood and adolescence, always calling the protagonist by her name. She was certain that one day she would be called to one of these fantasy worlds, even writing various farewell letters for when that day came. But, as we know, life isn't an anime. And after a long day of work, we see her mother call to ask if she can get rid of the letters she wrote as a child. She ends up saying yes, since she chose the ones she needed before leaving. But when the call ends, the same isekai bus appears, as always. We see the story she wrote as a child, giving great detail to every character, no matter how insignificant. She gives a significant role to her sister, Ayana, because after she fell in love, and her sister found out about the relationship, she seemed very jealous of her partner, since she loved her more than anyone else in the world, beginning a series of attacks on her and her partner. Even her parents forbade them from seeing each other at their house, as they could be prone to an attack from her younger sister. Elsewhere, we see her meeting with one of her lackeys, handing him a cursed book that causes her to lose her mind. At that moment, Konoha's consciousness takes control of her body, but out of nowhere, the royal guards realize her plan and manage to intercept her, imprisoning her for the crime she was about to commit. It isn't long before her sister, Konoha, arrives and frees her, concerned for her well-being and asking if she's hurt. This makes Ayana incredibly charmed, as she's exactly as she imagined. But her happiness doesn't end there, as Ayana's boyfriend, Jinnaford, arrives. As expected, he's quite attractive, since the whole story was invented to fulfill her childhood fantasies. However, he seems to harbor some hatred towards Ayana, distancing Konoha from her, because he can't believe she still let her live after everything she's done to her, trying to poison her, spreading false rumors about her, and ruining her reputation. Her horse with a cow, Ayana is shocked because in her mind it seemed like a great job she had done with that character, but in reality she has created someone so detestable. Finally, at Konoha's request, she has been pardoned and taken to the distant lands of the city. Sentenced to 3 months of house arrest, she intends to use this time to work on her character and avoid being as annoying as she has been. However, as she mutters this, she remembers that during those months, Ayana was murdered by a royal servant, putting her in a difficult position regarding the identity of the servant who planned to kill her. When she arrives, all the maids seem afraid of her, and she's taken to a room where she meets Sul, her servant who will be in charge of her. She reacts quickly, realizing that he is her killer, and her attitude towards him is quite inappropriate. To calm her, he simply brings her tea, giving Ayana a moment of relaxation after everything that has happened that day. She uses this time to recall everything she wrote about that world, so that she won't die while trying to get herself out of the mess she's gotten into. Suddenly, Sul silently enters. He tries to finish her off, but Ayana reacts quickly and stops him, asking for paper and a pen to write a letter to her sister, thanking her and apologizing for the trouble he has caused her. This raises some doubts about Sul, since it's very strange that she would want to write a letter to her, making her suspicious of what her plan might be. The next day, we see that the letter she wrote is first given to Jinnaford, who destroys it because he doesn't trust any of the words she says after everything she's done. It's revealed that he told Sul that during Ayana's upcoming vacation, he must end her life so that she won't continue to threaten his wife. Back with Ayana, we see Sul reveal that the letter couldn't be answered that day because Konoha had gone to visit an uncle, and therefore didn't have time to write a proper reply. This makes Ayana think, as she doesn't remember having an uncle. But she quickly recalls that it makes sense since Sul's origins trace back to Konoha, saving him from a slave trader and adopting him as one of the family. Then she says the same phrase she used when he was a child, surprising Sul, who asks how she knows those words. This prompts Ayana to come up with a lame excuse to get out of the predicament she's gotten herself into. When she arrives in her room, she begins to recap the entire history of that world, and she remembers that the wedding of Konoha and Prince Jinnaford is coming soon. However, she recalls a tragic ending to that wedding, as her uncle's story is both tragic and morbid. When her mother was young, he had fallen in love with her, but she quickly rejected him. But when she had Konoha and saw how much they resembled each other, he became obsessed with her, devising a plan, that wedding. Before they could marry, he would attack Jinniford with an enchanted sword that would knock him out of the fight so he could take Konoha for himself. But in that confrontation, Konoha would unleash her hidden magic, managing to kill her uncle. This forces her to take control of her life in order to awaken Jinniford. So he remembers what Sul told him in the morning and quickly gets ready to avoid that end. But when he tries to ask for help and request a horse from his servants, because of the fear they have of him, he cannot get a horse to go to his sister's aid. Because of all this, she decides to go on her own to get a horse to save her sister from that fate. But we see that not everything she writes is so real. Since in her story, Iana was a great horse tamer and an excellent rider. But at that moment, she only feels fear and worry elsewhere. We see Jinniford and Konoha arrive at the chapel where his uncle asks him to put down his sword. Since after all, a wedding is too sacred a moment to carry a weapon. But when they are about to get married, he attacks Jinniford, but is stopped by a blow from Ayana's horse. Feeling very relieved that they are still all right, she leaves him in Konoha's care. But quickly, the old man awakens from the blow and attacks Iana, but is saved by Sul, who has been following her since she left in search of a horse to help her at that moment. When they are outside, Jinniford thanks Ayana and tells her that surely all the trouble she caused was to prevent their wedding, since she knew her uncle planned to destroy Konoha if it happened. Konoha, however, rejects this theory, believing she was simply evil in everything she did. Even so, she feels quite relieved that she changed history, dying at Sol's hands and preventing Jinniford's spell. However, this also prevented Konoha from awakening her powers after the confrontation, leaving her worried about what might happen from now on. Even so, Sul tells her she shouldn't worry about it, because if anything were to happen to Konoha, he would be there to personally take down whoever was responsible. The next day she seems calmer, having been pardoned for her past crimes. Her sister and Jinniford even invite her for tea, and Jinniford helps her climb to Konoha, as the path is quite difficult. At that moment, she realizes that Jinniford is still quite her type, since she wrote him with all her likes and dislikes. Sul reciprocates, offering her help so as not to bother Prince Jinniford. Although she still finds him quite attractive, she remains somewhat afraid of him, knowing her role in this story. Now we see a scene where Konoha's mother asks her if there's anyone she likes. But knowing her, she knows there isn't. However, Konoha, addicted to the stories she writes, tells her mother that she does like someone, mentioning a character from her stories, which makes her mother look at her a little strangely. Returning to the story, Iana is a little annoyed that everyone likes Princess Konoha so much, thinking they might suspect her. Even Sul approaches and tells her that he's been watching her. But just then, the princess calls her. They arrive at a garden where the princess invites them to have tea as a way of thanking them for saving her. But Iana is simply surprised that the nights she herself wrote are so beautiful when she can see them in person. The scene becomes more emotional when a knight appears, and both of them are excited to see him, commenting that he enjoys spending time with her. In her excitement, Konoha wanders a little way from the group, which seems like a bad idea since a giant wolf emerges from the forest intending to kidnap her, succeeding in its mission. Iana also vividly remembers this moment from when she wrote the story. Only now there's a problem. She's summarizing within this summary, recalling when she wrote that part of the story as a teenager discovering, teenage things. And remember the wolf? Well, to sum it up and avoid getting yelled at by Mr. YouTube, the wolf is a horny, lecherous creature. She snaps back to reality and accidentally lets slip that she knows things about the wolf, which prompts the guards to start interrogating her to find out more. And although she hesitates a bit, she tells them everything she knows. While they seem to be resting by a campfire, she tells them about both her strengths and weaknesses, and suggests that the best course of action would be to try to rescue the princess at night. Someone asks what happens if dawn breaks, but she can't tell them what will really happen. So she just says it will eat her, but unfortunately for her, Sul questions her, since she had said it was her first time in this forest. This doesn't make sense, given how much information she knows about that wolf. She just says she read about it before coming. A prepared person is worth two. But Sul insists that if she knew all that, why didn't she warn everyone? She gets nervous, but just then, the knight army is ready to go and find Princess Konoha. Once they arrive at the supposed wolf's lair, Jinniford tells Iana to wait with Sul, as he doesn't want anything bad to happen to her. Although she doesn't like the idea of staying with Sol at all. Jinifred is determined to rescue the princess, no matter if it costs him his life. And this scene makes Iana fantasize about what she's always dreamed of. Just then, more beasts emerge from the forest and attack the group. Iana runs toward the princess when she hears her screams, finally reaching the wolf and the princess. Iana throws herself between them to take the blow, but just in time, Jinifred and Sol save them. The sight of Jinifred protecting the princess makes her blush. But then Sol lifts Iana in his arms and carries her towards the castle, making her blush even more. In a scene change, we see Jinifred talking to Sol about killing Iana. Although Jinifred hesitates, Sol tells him she will follow his orders without question. Sometime later, Sol enters Iana's room to give her a letter, an invitation to a ball. She and the princess prepare for the party. Iana understands that this is another chapter in the story she created. She knows that if the princess dances that day, terrible things will happen. And Sol overhears this. We also see a summary of why this chapter was created. It's all because no one invited her to the summer festival. Returning to the story, Iana will do everything in her power to prevent her from dancing with the princes. We see her intervene when the first prince approaches Konoha. After preventing this from happening, she heads towards the food, hoping the meat will look like it does in her drawings. But Sol intervenes and invites her to dance, leaving her in shock. He simply takes her hand, and they begin to dance, surprising everyone, especially her. At the end of the dance, he asks her what her intentions are, making it clear that he's figured out what she's doing, but doesn't know why. Sol says goodbye, and she doesn't understand why he hasn't killed her. She created him for that purpose. She decides to go rest in a room, but while she's there, the hallway and that entire area of the castle seem to be on fire. Jinifred and Sol are worried about the princess, but she's behind a tree crying and asking where Iana is. She doesn't know why this is happening since she didn't write it, but she concludes that her own story wants to kill her in order to fulfill its objectives. Since Sol hasn't done so, and with this in mind, she knows that by altering this chapter, the princess won't go on her journey and won't die, allowing her to be happy forever. Iana accepts this because it's what she always wanted, for the princess of Konoha to be happy, even if she wasn't reincarnated as her. And just when she had accepted her fate, she's saved by Sol, which makes everyone happy. But she still doesn't understand what's happening. When she thanks Sol, he only says that he wants to understand her better, so he'll never leave her side. This makes her heart race, not knowing if it's because she senses danger or because she's falling in love. On a new day, we see Iana having breakfast with the others, enjoying the peace and quiet. Even Konoha has a kind gesture for her, which thrills her. It's what she's always dreamed of. She continues to reflect on how charming Jinifred is, and then Sol makes her nervous. It's because she likes him a little, but also because she doesn't want him to end up with her, as she wrote in her novel, always with the goal of protecting Konoha and preventing that from happening. Now, Sol invites in a visitor who has come to see Iana, which leaves her and the princess somewhat confused since she doesn't remember him very well. Iana doesn't recall writing about such a character, but the princess explains that he's a childhood friend. As the conversation progresses, we see that this character likes Iana, which makes her remember everything about him. In short, he's another villain who's going to complicate things considerably. He even asks her how things are going with their agreement, but she replies that she doesn't understand. He then subtly whispers in her ear that he's talking about destroying Konoha, which makes her very nervous, and she quickly walks away with the princess. She also remembers more about everything and knows she has to stop him before he hurts Konoha, or Sol will become suspicious, and it will all be over. We see Iana tell the others that she's going out with Yomi for a walk. Sol offers to guide them, but Iana says she'll do it, and although somewhat confused, the others let them go. She pushes him away and, as she does, confesses the truth that she no longer wants to destroy Konoha and that she now loves it. This upsets Yomi a little, as she idealizes the beautiful and evil Iana who wanted to destroy Konoha. But Iana tells her that that has changed, which upsets Yomi even more, and she believes she's been brainwashed. In a scene change, Ilo says to get on rinsed. Iana is reflecting on her past self and why she was writing these things. And she's worried because Yomi is making things very complicated for her. We see Konoha notice her and ask what's wrong. Iana says she only went out to water the flowers. and she tells Iana that if anything happens, she can confide in her since she's her older sister and will help her. They end up having tea together, but unfortunately for Iana, Yomi sees them from afar and gets a little annoyed. Iana starts looking for Yomi around the mansion, but can't find him. Instead, she finds Sul, who starts questioning her, but they don't get anywhere. When Sul leaves, Yomi appears and makes Iana nervous as he also questions her. She begs him not to do anything reckless, and he assures her that he won't, that he'll do everything quietly without being discovered. This worries Iana, as he even showed her the weapons he has hidden. Later that night, she's in her room trying to remember her novel and how Yomi destroyed Konoha. She manages to recall a little, so she goes out to find Yomi and stop him, but unfortunately, she's spotted by Sul. We see that Yomi has arrived at the princess's room and that she's asleep. But Sul knocks on the door trying to get her attention. The princess of Konoha comes out into the hallway, so Sul rushes in, but the room is empty. We see Yomi and Iana on the roof of the mansion, and he's about to finish off the supposed Konoha, but Iana defends herself at the last moment. She tries to explain the situation to him, saying she doesn't want to kill Konoha, but Yomi only misunderstands more and now wants to kill Sul. Iana explains that he is important and no one else should die. While on the roof, she loses her balance and falls, but Sul manages to save her. He tells her to avoid such dangerous places since they don't know if he'll arrive in time next time. He excuses himself by saying he was looking at the stars, and also asks if she heard anything. He says no, but he actually did, and then they can each go to their rooms. Yomi insists on wanting to kill Sul, but Iana stops him. Although he doesn't seem to understand and says he will kill him no matter what it takes to defend her. Now we see a scene from her high school, life and a situation in which a teacher returns. A novel she wrote and handed in by mistake instead of the real work. But she wakes up. It seems it was just a dream. Upon waking, she makes some noise, and both Sul and Yomi rush to her, worried. Iana assures her that everything is fine and that she can leave, so he departs, leaving them alone. Yomi again declares that she will finish off Sul at the first opportunity. Our protagonist reflects on the entire situation and how Yomi's arrival will complicate everything. If he kills Sul, as he's declared, Princess Konoha will suffer her death, and suspicion will automatically fall on both her and Yomi. And even if Yomi doesn't kill Sul, they'll discover it and eventually find Iana to eliminate her. This leaves her very worried, so she has to devise a plan to stop Yomi, no matter the cost. To this end, Iana spies on Konoha and Sul, and she also recalls more details from her novel and about the characters. But then, Yomi performs some kind of wind summoning that throws Sul into the air, away from the mansion. He lands like a true Lele wrestler. Iana asks if he's hurt, clearly worried about him. But like a total player, he asks if she's worried about him. What she takes as suspicion, but Sul confirms it. As she wonders what this villain is plotting, Sul tries to figure out what happened, concluding that it was magic. But the strange thing is that no one in the mansion knows how to use magic. But Iana remembers that Yomi can. She also adds that at this point in the story, the princess should already have powers, which is why her enemies have already developed them. The next day, Iana will be with Yomi all day to try to control him. And while they are in the garden, she sees the princess and Lord Jinifor, who tells the princess to go to sleep. They notice Iana and Yomi's presence. And the first thing Yomi does is offer them tea, which she has brought from very far away. Although somewhat hesitant, Jinifor and Sul accept. But this worries Iana because Yomi knows about poisons, and this could go wrong. Just as he's about to serve the tea, Iana causes an accident so she can throw the cups away. Yomi confirms that it was indeed Viveno, and when Sul approaches to tell her to clean up, she detects a strange smell. She immediately runs to get him away, knowing that as an experienced killer, he'll detect it without hesitation. So she convinces him to clean up herself. At that moment, she runs off to find cleaning supplies, but Yomi gently stops her, trying to prevent her from tripping again. We learn a bit about Yomi's backstory, and that she likes the idea of him being so polite and handsome. But thinking about this reminds her of how Yomi will die, and she blames it on the fact that when she wrote that part of the novel, she was filled with anger, and the boys around her weren't nice to her. As they walk through the hallways, Iana asks her to please not do things like what happened today again. But oh surprise, shh, 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 "Calm down, little one. I planted a spell that will activate at any moment," which she doesn't understand, but instantly a loud noise is heard in the background. So she runs out to see what happened, and we see that a killer plant is attacking the princess. Iana arrives in time to start beating the plant to a pulp while promising herself that she will defend even Yomi because she doesn't want anyone to die because of her. And luckily, Sol and Jennifer arrive, and now they make mincemeat of the monster plant. This leaves Iana somewhat scared, since if Yomi confronts them, she's dead. This leaves Iana somewhat scared, since if Yomi confronts them, she's dead. In the background, Sol can be heard figuring everything out. The plant, the tea, and why Iana is acting strangely. She confronts Iana, which shocks her, but quickly Yomi confesses that it was him throwing a glove to the ground as a sign of a duel. If Sol picks it up, it's as if she accepts, and that's exactly what happens. Sol accepts the duel. Both Iana and Konoha are tense, both believing this must be a misunderstanding. The princess even steps between them to calm the situation, but Yomi says it's too late to resolve things by talking. She grabs Konoha by the neck and threatens her. But Sol pushes her away and draws her great sword. Making her let go, Sol explains to the princess that once a duel is accepted, there's no going back, and she apologizes. Once again, Konoha is about to convince Sol that it's unnecessary, but Jennifer appears and confirms that once a duel is accepted, there's no turning back. And they don't want to disrespect the gods of war. We're in the middle of the mansion's courtyard. Jennifer recites the rules of the duel, and most importantly, the duel ends only when one remains alive. With everything clear, the duel begins. Swords clash here, swords clash there, and the fight is evenly matched, which surprises Iana, who thinks Sol is holding back. But then Jennifer says something is wrong, and Iana confirms it. Sol isn't moving as she usually does. She ends up remembering that it's her fault. Since the day she saved her from falling from the roof, she injured her left hand, the one she decided to fight with. She steps between the duel, and Sol and Yomi insist that Iana knows that when facing Yomi, she is putting herself in a complicated situation. But she knows that if she doesn't do it, everything will get even more complicated. However, Yomi cannot attack Iana. He loves her, so he ends up giving up. Even so, Iana feels that they are still suspicious, so she makes up that everything was a misunderstanding, and that Yomi only wanted to defend her because he thought they were mistreating her, apologizing non-stop. Jennifer approaches with a look of disbelief, but he ends up accepting that it could be his fault since at first he treated her badly, thinking she had bad intentions. And this must have reached Yomi, which is why the misunderstanding started. The point is that they believe her excuse and she feels relieved. Even Sol comments that if everything was about that, he will let the topic go. But he warns Iana that he becomes a protective male if he sees Konoha in danger, so he asks her to avoid doing things that could be misinterpreted. Sol, Jennifer, and the princess enter the mansion. But just before they go in, Iana faints without knowing why, and she starts remembering her past life. After a moment, she wakes up again in the novel world, and Yomi was waiting for her, worried. She cannot believe it is already the next day, and gets worried because she thinks she has work and will be fired if she is late. But that is only in her head, because she is no longer in Japan living a normal employee life. Yomi asks her to rest and admits that after the duel, he just went along with the situation. But he will not forgive her for apologizing to Konoha and the others, showing that he still wants to end them. She knows she already convinced the others, but still has not convinced Yomi to stop. Now Yomi misinterprets everything she said about her past life, thinking that is the reason she fears them. Before Yomi goes out to face them again, she stops him and thinks about how to convince him that she no longer wants anyone to die. She realizes the only way is to speak to him seriously and firmly, and it works so much that he even lets out a small bark when she calls him puppy. His attitude changes drastically. The evil Yomi disappears. Now he says he will take Iana out and serve her without complaining. Even though the change is extreme, she believes thanks to this there will be no problems for now. She is resting when Jennifer appears, asking if she feels better. She gets excited because he is so handsome, but regains control and tells him she is much better. She tells him he can go be with Konoha, but he explains he wants to talk alone with her, shocking her. He explains that they were close to being engaged, but she was indifferent, which made him give up. Over time, he understood she did it for his and Konoha's sake, and he thanks her. This makes her blush and her temperature rises. Jinofor gets worried, but she says resting will help. We learn that in her past life, Jinofor was always her ideal man, but only if she had reincarnated as the princess. Iana wonders where Yomi is, but Sul appears behind her with tea. She imagines he wants to poison her, but Sul just tells her that if she still feels sick, she should not run around the room. They talk about how Iana got involved in a duel like that. And he thanks her because without that, he wouldn't have realized he needs to work harder to protect his masters. At that moment, Konoha knocks and brings flowers to help her feel better. Ayana reflects that she cannot let her emotions win, especially because she wrote these characters herself, so she forces herself to become emotionally stronger. Sol calls Jinofor and Diana to go with Princess Konoha, but Yomi arrives asking to stay longer in the mansion because the road to his house is blocked. They accept, but she knows that if he stays, she will have to keep controlling him and be careful with every step, which causes her to faint again.